Hello and welcome to Election 2015 Ask Nigel Farage. Over the next 30 minutes, the leader of the UK Independence Party will face questions and cross-examination from our audience here in the Drum Arts Centre in Birmingham. Tonight's programme is one of a series. The others feature David Cameron, Ed Miliband, Nick Clegg, Nicola Sturgeon and Leanne Wood, each taking questions from members of the public. Now, the audience here has been carefully selected to ensure that a quarter are backing UKIP, while the rest are divided between supporters of the other parties and some voters who have not yet decided which way they'll vote. Before we start, though, let's welcome Nigel Farage.
Thank you.
And now let's go to our first question, and it's from lady there in the back row, Joshna Patney. Joshna.
Right. Would an exit from Europe be damaging to the UK economy, Nigel?
Well, we're not exiting Europe. Let's be very clear about that. I love Europe. It's a wonderful place. It's got different countries, different peoples, different languages, cultures, wines, cheeses. It's a great place. And provided it's democratic and not fighting each other, it is, I think, in many ways, the richest, culturally, the richest continent on Earth. However, what now masquerades as being Europe, what has hijacked the word Europe, is something called the European Union, which has a flag, it has an anthem, it has a president, not that anyone can ever name who they are, and it is a political union that now makes nearly 75% of our laws, costs us a great deal of money, and I think is wholly unnecessary, not just for Britain, but I feel that for the rest of Europe too. And what I want to do is to amicably divorce ourselves from political union and have a simple free trade agreement, which, interestingly, is what my mum and dad voted for in a referendum 40 years ago on what was called a common market. So let's have trade, let's have friendship, and can I just finish by saying that some big businesses say, yeah, but if we're not in Europe, it would damage our economy because they wouldn't buy our goods. Well, we manufacture cars here in the West Midlands that are sold into the European market, and indeed to India and China too, but they sell us nearly 1 million cars a year more than we sell them. And the point is this, we're their biggest marketplace, so they need us more than we need them.
Joshna, do you want to respond to that? Because your question was, would it damage the UK economy by leaving the EU?
Yes, that's what I meant. Yes.
Right. Do you want to add anything to what Nigel has just said?
I understand there are penalties to come out of EU.
No, there are no penalties to come out.
What about the tariffs, though, Nigel? They'll be talking about tariffs if you were setting up bilateral agreements.
Well, that actually would be against the World Trade Organization rules. And remember, there are nearly 60 countries in the world that trade with the EU without tariff barriers. There would be no change to British business with the EU at all. But what we would be able to do is to negotiate our own trade deals with the Commonwealth and elsewhere. So I see a plus from this, not a minus.
Let's take some other questions. The gentleman here.
HSBC obviously announced last week that they're considering moving their headquarters from the UK. You've got links with the city yourself. One of the main reasons for that was the uncertainty of leaving the EU. They want us to stay in the EU. I was just wondering your stance on that, because you don't want big businesses like HSBC leaving the country.
Well, the whole point about the city, and when we talk about the city, we generally think of the Square Mile and Canary Wharf and people earning vast sums of money. Actually, our financial services business is big here in Birmingham, and it's big in Cardiff, and it's big in Manchester, and it's insurance companies, and it's banks. And what we've done is we've transferred control of Britain's biggest industry to a new set of institutions in Brussels who actually don't really like the way that our free market, as they see it, Anglo-Saxon model works. HSBC are leaving, not because of uncertainty. HSBC are leaving because they see a banking regime, and despite the awful things that happened 10 years ago, but they see a banking regime and a regulatory regime that makes London too expensive a place to do business. Right. And what I'm arguing is this. Financial services are Britain's biggest industry. We made a massive mistake giving control of the banks away from the Bank of England to a new regulatory authority. Gordon Brown got that wrong, but we should be in control of that industry. It matters hugely for jobs all over Britain.
Hands up, anybody else who would like to say something on this? And just to say, of course, HSBC, how many jobs would be lost if they did relocate, Nigel?
Well, about 5,000 initially,
okay.
but because that would be the HQ. Potentially, though, it's more than that.
The lady right in the centre of the second row, yes, your question.
In In 2017, there's no referendum held whether you want to stay in the EU or not. And if that vote comes back and says that the majority do want to stay in the EU, then isn't the UK Independent Party fundamentally flawed? And will you honour the British people and what they want to do?
Well, hang on. First things first. The point about a referendum is we've had a variety of promises of referendums that have never been delivered. Labour regularly promised referendums, didn't deliver them. Mr Cameron said, I give you this cast iron guarantee that if I'm Prime Minister, I'll give you a referendum on the Lisbon Treaty. He didn't deliver. He spent 2011 and 2012 saying there wouldn't be a referendum. Now he says there would be a referendum. Here's the key. I want there to be a referendum, yes. I certainly don't want to wait till 2017. There is no need to do so. But I want that referendum conducted on full, free and fair terms. And what I mean by that is that both sides must have the same spending limits. The broadcasters must have an ombudsman to make sure there is a proper, even debate. And we must define who is qualified to vote in this referendum and who isn't. No. And if it's a full, free and fair referendum, I will accept the result. Would it make UKIP redundant? No, because just look at what's happened in Scotland. The Scots rejected their independence referendum, and yet the SNP have gone to remarkable heights since
Just before we move on to the next subject area, just a quick show of hands. Who at this moment in time would vote to leave the EU? And who would want to stay? Probably, as it is, 35% saying leave, the rest saying stay in at the moment.
If you ask the question of the British people, do you want a free trade deal as opposed to membership of the European Union, 2/3 of British people say they want free trade but not political union.
Let's go on to the second question.
How can UKIP accuse migrants of benefit tourism while simultaneously blaming them for stealing British jobs? Is it UKIP's policy to simply blame immigration for every issue Britain currently faces?
Well, that's... The applause for your question is interesting, because 77% of British people want us to have proper border controls and reduced immigration levels, all right? So this is about... you know, what are we talking about? I am pro-immigration, but I'm pro-controlled immigration. And the way the Australians do this strikes me as being absolutely bang-on right. What they say is you have to have a trade or skill to bring to Australia. What they say is if you've got a criminal record, you can't go to Australia, which is rather different to their historical past, but never mind, we'll gloss over that. And what they say is you've got to have some money to bring, to bring with you so you can look after yourself, and you have to bring your own health insurance. And I want us to have an Australian-style point system. I'm not blaming immigrants for anything, but what I'm saying is this. When you have net migration into Britain at 300,000 people a year, which is about 10 times what it was for most of the post-war period, that does put massive pressure on housing, massive pressure on hospitals, massive pressure on primary schools, and I think, and the majority of British people think, we need to get a grip. But at the heart of this, and this is the question that the other party leaders tonight won't answer, at the heart of this is, as members of the European Union, we have an open door to 485 million people, any of whom can come, and that is what I want to change.
Let's take some interventions from over here. Yes, the lady in the front row.
You say it puts up the pressure on hospitals, schools. I live in North Wales. We've got very few we've got Poles, which there's always Wrexham area have always had a high level. But we've got disastrous health or education. They're not under pressure by any immigrants. And the reason some of our youngsters don't work is because of transport links. They cannot get to cities. So it's nothing to do with immigrants. In actual fact, the few immigrants that we've got in actually support the whole community. They fund things, so you can't say that. And they even try and learn Welsh, which I think is brilliant.
The problems of the Welsh NHS are, of course, a problem of devolution. And it has been a spectacular failure that a Labour-run administration has run health in Wales as badly as it has. But just getting back to the first question, I talked about health tourism the other week. Health tourism is costing us in this country up to £2 billion a year.
Now, £2 billion if you include all foreign visitors and if you include temporary migrants. Actually, the figures say 0.06% of health tourism.
I think we could save easily £1 billion a year. And the issue I specifically raised was the issue that since 2012, anybody can come to Britain, not to live, but anybody can come to Britain and get HIV treatment on the National Health Service. Now, it's interesting. I have here a letter from a 30-year-old HIV positive man in London who says, why are the waiting rooms now full to overflowing? Why does it now take me 3 weeks to get an appointment? And he says to me, it is because since we opened the door in 2012, we're now incapable of providing HIV treatment for people legally.
And you brought this up at the
Britain.
other debate, and there was quite a strong reaction to it. Can I just take some reaction here? I'll take some reaction here. The gentleman here in the second row.
Hello, Nigel. I come from a Sikh community background.
Yep.
My grandfather came to this country as a Sikh man through the British Regiment. Great iconic figures like Winston Churchill praised the Sikh community at that time. Being the third generation now and growing up in a Sikh home and wider interaction with other communities like the Hindu community and their voices and their experience, what I've gathered is that they collectively, from my experience, have stated that immigration at a fast rate that it's grown is dangerous for this country. It's not healthy at all, not because just the financial deficits, but also the values and true values of what it is to be British. Not to say we have manners and say sorry, yes please, but more than that.
All right.
And when you have this fast pace coming in, we're accommodating them. Through that, we're watering down our values. Instead,
all right,
they should be accommodating us.
Let Nigel answer that.
I think what's really interesting is the recent massive poll on attitudes towards current immigration levels. What was interesting was that every single ethnic group in this country thinks immigration is running at much too fast a rate. And this is not a question of race in any way at all. It is actually a question, simply of numbers and simply of the type of people coming to Britain. We want skilled people who bring their own health insurance to come to Britain. And I'm pleased to say that we've got several members of the Sikh community who are standing as candidates for us in some of our target seats in this general election.
Nigel, just quickly, one more on the subject of immigration from the front row.
If you look at many of your target seats, the majority of the people actually living there are white British. Immigration is not an issue. So if it is the issue that you make it out to be, why aren't you gaining seats across the country where there are large immigrant communities that is affecting the people there? It seems as if it's actually not the issue that you make it out to be.
Well, hang on, I mean, roughly 12% of the British population are immigrants. That's roughly the figure. So apart from a few inner city seats, there aren't that many seats, actually where the immigrant community would be in the majority anyway. The point is this. The reason, even if you live in an area that has not been affected by opening up the door to 10 former communist countries, what has happened is this. Because of a massive oversupply of unskilled and semi-skilled labour, wages in this country have been driven down. And everybody knows it. Who's benefited? The big multinationals, the giant landowners, have turned this country into the low-wage capital of Europe, and it's ordinary workers that have paid the price.
Although, interestingly, there are 700,000 jobs still vacant at an unskilled level. But let's take another question from the gentleman here, please.
Why, Mr Farage, do you want to increase the size of the military and increase military spending if at the same time you want to reduce military intervention abroad?
Well, you're quite right. You are quite right. I firmly believed that the Iraq war was a revenge attack from President Bush because it was an America whose mainland had never, ever been invaded in the way that it was on 9/11. And we stupidly, Blair stupidly followed on from that and frankly did it without telling the British people the truth. I was opposed to that. The one that I was really opposed to was Libya. It struck me as being absolutely mad, and I simply couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that the three so-called big parties in Britain, along with President Sarkozy and their friends in the EU, were so desperate to bomb Libya. And I warned at the time, however bad a man Gaddafi may be, if you bomb Libya, if you destabilise Libya, it will not be the right thing to do.
So why spend
and look
more?
at the results. But this is the point. The point is, we live in a world that is probably more uncertain than it's been at any point since the fall of the Berlin Wall. And all I'm asking for is 2% of our annual spending to maintain adequate defences. Think of it, if you like, as paying the insurance premium on your house.
All right.
You probably won't have a fire next year, but if you do, it's better that you've paid the insurance.
Let's get a range of views on that issue. The man at the front here.
I'm just going to quickly put it in because we talked about the NHS earlier.
Yeah.
One of UKIP's policies is to reverse or change the smoking ban. And when the NHS is such a massive issue...
Can we just stick to defence? We'll come back to that in a minute. The man at the back.
Yeah,
Nigel, this
Yes.
may not come as a surprise to you, but your party's been labelled as they've been labelled as closet racists by David Cameron and some of the other media and some of the public. So my question to you is that voters that are on the brink, who are unsure whether to vote UKIP or not, and have a nervousness about this, how do they know that you're not a party of Roseanne Duncan's?
All right, let Nigel answer that.
Let me
Nigel,
answer that.
answer that, and then we'll go on
answer
to
that.
defence.
Let me answer that. You know, let me answer that. This party is a non-racist, non-sectarian political party. I mentioned to our Sikh friend here, we have got people from all races, all religions, and all nationalities standing for us as candidates, working for us as activists. You know, and really, I'll tell you why. Mr. Cameron began it, calling us closet racist, but many others have done it. They know that on the issue of open-door immigration, they cannot answer the question, how can you control immigration when you have an open door to 500 million people? You can't. And so what they do is, rather than going for the ball, they're going for the man, and they're throwing this abuse at me. Sadly, some people believe it, but you know what? Most sensible-minded people see straight through it. Now, I'll be back on defence.
On defence. Are there any views on defence to put to... Yes, the gentleman there.
Sorry, is that
Yes?
don't you think that your defence spending should also be twinned with foreign aid budget? So why are you attempting to slash the foreign aid budget? And also, if you're so obsessed with immigration, surely if you slash foreign aid, then you're going to increase the number of asylum seekers who've come here?
No.
Hang on.
No. Now, but, I mean, you've linked a lot of things in there. Can I just tell you this? Can I just tell you what we do to Africa as a European Union? We put huge barriers against them selling to us their agricultural products, you know, tariff barriers, etc. We rape and pillage the fisheries off the west coast of Africa. We're behaving in a neo-colonial way to Africa, and we assuage our consciences by giving a bit of foreign aid that in nearly every case goes to the wrong people. And I'm sick of this hypocrisy when it comes to foreign aid in Africa, and I think that for the political class, led by David Cameron, to have increased foreign aid at a time when they've slashed our defences to a level that we can't defend ourselves is simply wrong.
The gentleman there at the end.
Hello, sorry. I'm just interested to, it's interesting to hear your views, really, because obviously I'm of the opinion that it's actually, society's moved on a little bit. We're all from different areas. We've moved on nowadays with transport links and so on and so forth. And I think we're in danger. Ignorance breeds contempt, in my view. And therefore, it's good to have a good mix of people within a society. And that's where the true strength of a community comes from, in my view. And I'd be interested to know what your opinion would be if, subsequent to a UKIP winning the election, what would happen looking backwards if the vote was actually won to leave the EU? Would you?
I don't want to go backwards.
Get rid of everybody?
I don't want to go backwards. I don't want to go backwards. I want to go forwards.
But isn't that
I
what
want
you're
to
doing?
leave. I want to leave an ailing, failing, out-of-date political union, be independent, self-governing, and to re-engage with the world. And I think we're mad to have turned our backs on the Commonwealth. There are 2 billion people out there in the Commonwealth. I want a trade deal with them and better relations with them. I understand fully what you say. A society with a mixture of people in it is a more exciting and a better place. But I repeat the point. Every ethnic group in Britain wants immigration to be controlled, and a continued open door is not good for this country.
Let's take a few more views here. The gentleman at the back.
Do you regard Mr Putin as a threat to Britain?
I think he probably is now, yes. I regret bitterly our sheer stupidity, and this was led by Cameron and Osborne, but supported by Labour and the Lib Dems. We have for 10 years pursued a policy where we publicly say we want the Ukraine to be a member not just of the European Union, but of NATO as well. And Russia is paranoid about people encroaching upon their borders, and I think we bear a very heavy burden of responsibility in precipitating that Ukrainian crisis. However, what's done is done, and we now have a Mr Putin who is clearly acting aggressively. I think he is a threat to us. I think there is also a threat from some of the extreme Islamic elements in the Middle East, and it's back to the question about defence. We face these threats in the world. We need to have good defences, because we just don't know what could happen in the future.
Did you not say you admired Vladimir Putin once?
No, I didn't. I said, isn't it wonderful how this guy... I said I didn't like him. I wouldn't like to live in his country. Too many journalists go missing. But as an operator, at least he revealed some of the truths that stopped us getting involved in yet another war in Syria.
Well, thank you for clarifying
All right.
that. Gentleman here.
I just want to say, if the UN recommends a 2% spend of GDP on defence, why the other major parties can't commit to it?
And would you try and force the other parties to do that, Nigel Farage, if you had the chance?
You know, I mean, let me say this to you. The group of UKIP MPs that are in the House of Commons after May the 7th are going to make defence a major issue. We will speak about it regularly, but more than just defence, can I say, we will also make looking after our veterans, many of whom have come back from those conflicts physically and mentally wounded. And we now have 9,000 former servicemen and women living rough on the streets of this country, and that's disgusting. And we should do more to look after our ex-servicemen and women.
We're going to move on from defence now to the NHS, and let's have a question from Mark Dickinson.
How much longer can we afford to pay for the NHS with the rising and ageing population as well as health tourism?
Well, I completely get, Mark, your point about health tourism, and we can save quite a lot of money by making it clear that if people come here from all over the world to work, they have to bring their own health insurance. So absolutely with you on that, and that would save us... We could easily save £1 billion a year, easily save £1 billion a year plus doing that. The biggest challenge we face is, you're right, we are an ageing population. But we're also a growing population, and no one's made the correlation. I know the lady talked about Wales, but Wales is different. I mean, that to me is management failure. The population of this country has increased by 10 million, at least, in the last 25 years, and we simply haven't built up enough nurses, doctors and hospitals to cope with it. The one thing I'm certain of is, going on from here, if we want to continue to have a National Health Service that is free at the point of delivery and sticks to its founding principles, we are going to have to find a lot more money for the future. And anyone that tells you that there is any way we can decrease spending on health is wrong. We're going to have to find more money, and I'm proud of the fact that we're the only party who've pledged £3 billion more for the NHS a year, £12 billion plus over the course of the next Parliament, and we've actually funded it. What we get every morning now are the Prime Minister and others surprising us at breakfast by inventing money that they can't actually fund. So we need to think about it very seriously.
I'm just going to repeat the question just in case people missed it. How much longer can we afford to pay for the NHS with a rising and ageing population as well as health tourism? Let's get a response from this lady here.
You have stated in your manifesto that you were going to pay for the care of the elderly by creating a sovereign wealth fund from shale gas extraction, despite the fact that it's unsafe. Would you like to clarify?
What we're trying to do is to think about ways of dealing with the problem that the gentleman identified. Although, look, let's celebrate the fact we're living longer. All right, let's not talk about it as being a horrible burden. Let's find a way of dealing with it and paying for it. When the Norwegians started exploration in the late 1960s in the North Sea, there were many that said this could lead to an environmental disaster. We should not be doing it. The Norwegians did it. And we at the same time did it. The difference is, what the Norwegians did was to take a little bit of tax every year from those oil revenues and put it into a sovereign wealth fund, from which now they fund old age care. And I'm putting into plan something which longer term could help ease that problem.
Although the price of oil, of course, has shrunk. Can I just go to the gentleman at the back? Is this on health?
Yes.
Yes,
it is. My experience is that the NHS does not carry out adequate checks at the point that they provide the services to check whether the individual concerned is eligible for free national health insurance. That would immediately stop the tourism. That would immediately stop the people coming in who are not residents, who are not eligible for free national insurance, and that simple act would do it.
Let's just take a few more interventions, then you answer them all, Nigel. The gentleman at the back, and then I'll come to you at the front.
All this blame of immigration on the shortage of resources, the NHS, is a massive smokescreen. It's not founded by any actual statistics or data. The simple fact, the NHS is short of supply and high on demand. However, the life-threatening diseases and the priorities at the top of the spectrum are dealt with very efficiently. All this rhetoric you keep spreading about how bad the NHS is, people actually start believing it.
Well, I'm very sorry. I've had a rather checkered health career. I've had quite a few ups and downs, including quite a big plane crash a few years ago. And I know that if you're in real trouble, the critical care that the NHS gives you in that situation is probably the best in the world. All right? Well, actually, on cancer, strokes and heart disease, our rates are not as successful as they are in France. So I'm not here to knock the NHS, far from it. I'm here to say that it really matters. But on the demand side, the reason there's more demand, sir, is there are more people in the country, and we haven't built the NHS up enough. Let me give you an example.
Just briefly, because I want to get some other interventions.
We now have fewer GPs per capita than any other country in Europe. The gentleman there raised a very interesting point. There are two ways of doing this. There are two ways of making sure that people that turn up for healthcare are eligible. One is that we would all have to have a health card. You know, effectively, it would be like an identity card. And that does bring with it questions about the size of a state. That is one option. The other option is actually to make sure that anybody that applies for a visa or a work permit before they come into the country proves they've got health care. And do you know what? If you went to Australia or America, you would have to show that at customs before they even let you in.
But Nigel Farage, you were a believer in having social insurance in this country at one point. You say you've changed your mind and you believe it should be free at the point of use, but when do you think that discussion should be held again?
Well, look, when the Labour Party decided to privatise large chunks of the health service, all of us watched on, you know, Conservatives, Lib Dems, UKIP, we all watched on, hoping it would work. It didn't work, and actually, we've left ourselves with very, very big bills through the private finance initiative for the future. So no, I want it run publicly, but run properly.
Yes, the lady here.
Presumably one way you deal with an ageing population is to have us all die of smoking-related causes.
Oh dear. We're back to smoking again,
I'm sorry, but it is an issue. You said that you're not, you know, a retrograde party. However, you want to take a backward step on the smoking ban. And to be perfectly honest, your policies seem anachronistic across the board.
Very briefly, Nigel, it has to be quite brief.
I'm getting a bit of stick here as a smoker. We all have our sins, you know. Do you? Oh, do you? Well, you're a sinner.
10 seconds,
well, you're a sinner
Nigel.
too. Right, listen. Number one, the National Health Service, smoking-related diseases cost the NHS £2 billion a year. Tobacco revenue is about £11 billion a year. That's the first point. Second point. Would you say that Germany was an uncivilised, retrograde country, modern Germany? I don't think you would.
You'd have to ask your wife.
Oh, I don't think you would. Well, and she'd tell you that, unlike us, they exercise common sense.
We're going to have to leave it.
When they brought the smoking ban in, within 6 months...
We're running out of time.
Within 6 months, they'd reversed the ban and allowed separate smoking rooms.
I'm going to have to say goodbye while they're still talking here.
Tell us how to live our lives.
That's it from the audience here in Birmingham. Let's say thank you to Nigel Farage.